We have not talked about the farm amendment. I will, while we're waiting for the technical aspect of the microphone, I am sort of stalling, and I'll slide close to you.
Okay, I didn't know if you
help. Well, here, come a little, but just break down this farm amendment for us. What is it, and what does it purport to do?
Well, allegedly it purports to guarantee the right to farm, but the language is so vague it's seen as generally preventing most state curbs against corporate farms. You know, like the large hog farms, as far as any regulations on that. There's also there's a little provision in there that appears to allow more foreign ownership of Missouri land. Missouri now has a restriction on how much land.
So a chicken producer from China couldn't set up shop right now, but they might be able to in the future.
Well, Smithfield was bought by a Chinese
Smithfield,
company.
yeah. So Smithfield was right.
So it's kind of already happened, I would assume. So
The sale.
When I see the commercials, I see small family farms. It appears to be in plaid shirts and overalls, of course, and they seem like likable people that we who doesn't want to protect farming?
Like people like you, Casey.
Well, I'm just saying.
Well, here's what it's going to do. It's in the if it was in the Constitution, and let's say another ballot initiative to curb dog breeding operations passed, opponents of that particular proposal could go to court, point to that amendment, and try to get it thrown out.
It requires scrutiny, I think.
That's basically in essence, that's the point. That's the practical application of the amendment. I mean, it'll be up to the courts to decide how impactful it is. Some people think it'll have no impact at all. Some people think it, as Joe mentioned, it'll have a huge impact, especially if there's curbs on some of the bigger farms. So.
Yeah, it could prevent that. Also, there's some farmers who've been trying to get approval. The legislature approved it, but got tossed out by the governor to allow them to fence in deer for deer shoots. Now, that bill got overturned, got vetoed by the governor. There may be an attempt to overturn it, but there are some who say that actually this right to farm thing could, in fact, impact that, because some farmers claim that deer on their property should be considered livestock.
Is this something that even has an iota of impact on the urban core, or is this strictly for the rural folks?
Well, the story that just about the diseased basset hounds, okay? Not only does that touch your heartstrings, I mean, we are dog and cat people here. And that's why we look at this and say, like, look, okay, China might own the pig farm, but we are a group of people live in metropolitan areas that, we like to protect dogs and cats. Right. And this is just, it's undefensible, and that why it does impact us.
When I was in mid-Missouri in 2010, there were perfectly intelligent, reasonable people who told me that the puppy mill thing was the first step
to ending farming.
That it was going to be, the pigs were going to be next, the cows were going to be next, and all of that. Now, these weren't even people who were farmers, but it was very widespread. And I would come back to St. Louis, and I would tell my friends, listen, my smart friends in Jefferson City think this. And they say, they can't possibly think that. So there is such a divide on this, and it really is. And the puppy mill thing passed by about 51 to 49, and that's sort of the split of voting. And so it's interesting that it goes on the primary ballot, because that's a very low turnout. So
could you say the same about some of these other things? I mean, the right to arms. Are there other things that you could say the same thing about in terms of the divide between city and rural?
Well, I think there's a divide on the gun issue somewhat because of the concern of the police in the city of St. Louis and in Kansas City about being able to control through local regulation and so forth, whereas this would take out all of that. Now, there are already some state statutes that really limit the ability of local governments to enforce gun restrictions, but this one would really clear the decks. In fact, it may set up a conflict with some federal laws, and so that's some of the things. But that'll play out, because this may very well pass. I mean, they will have a turnout.
If there's environmental regulations, the state enforces a lot of national and federal environmental regulations, and this right to farm, they may try to say that certain regulations impact that. So we're going to be litigating, and this is the difficulty with these amendments. They're not addressed at something specific, so therefore until you litigate it, it could mean anything. And, that's kind of the cautionary tale about messing with the Constitution.
It's a constitutional amendment, which means it's there unless there's another vote to try and repeal it, which is highly unlikely if it passes.
While we're talking about right to farm and puppy mills, we should probably point out that the Humane Society of the United States has put in more than $300,000 recently.
Yeah, that happened today. And actually,
today.
yeah, I mean, I think that was
to go against this measure.
and I think that was, and that's a big deal because, as I've said many times, ballot initiatives that have opposition that spends a substantive amount of money are far more likely to fail than a ballot initiative that has opposition but that's not organized in spending money. So that's a big deal.
It depends what they're going to spend the money on. If they're going to be spending it on mailers targeted to frequent voters, are they going to use this for some ads on cable?
That's enough money to give you on TV for a couple of weeks.
But the farming, the pro-amendment side, because we don't have campaign donation limits, they could quickly come up with some money as well.
There's never been campaign donation limits for ballot initiatives.